Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, whenever you are. My name is Ben Gregory. I am a Special Olympics athlete from Montgomery County, and you are listening to So What, a Special Olympics Indiana podcast. I got a little too ahead of myself there. And this week we are joined by Mr. Patrick, and last names are my worst enemy. So I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Patrick Kozlowski, the manager of sports programs for Special Olympics Indiana. Thanks for having me on, Ben.
Oh, thank you for joining us today. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like how you got involved with Special Olympics, what you do with the Special Olympics, stuff like that?
Yeah, so my involvement actually started when I was in college. So I went to the University of Indianapolis. I majored in sport management. And part of our curriculum there is we have to do 2 internships before we graduate. So I actually did both of my internships with Special Olympics Indiana at the same time. So my senior year of college, I was pretty much a full-time intern. I was in the office almost like 35 hours a week. I worked pretty much a full schedule, and that's all I did. So as an intern, I got to see probably a little bit more than maybe what some other interns get to in that position. And so I did helped with basketball a little bit. I did a lot with summer games. And through that experience, that was my first time ever being exposed to Special Olympics and what it was about. And I just kind of fell in love with it. I really enjoyed it. And, I'm a sports guy. As you can tell, I've got my Chelsea flag right here in the background. So it just, with what I do, it kind of fit in naturally with my interests and what I'm good at. So I've been on staff now for about 5 years. Actually, it'll be 5 years tomorrow is my work anniversary. So yeah, so really, really good timing for this podcast.
Awesome.
So then what I do is my primary duties are planning and organizing our state level sport competitions. So going through the calendar, kind of starting in January, I oversee winter games. I oversee all of our state basketball tournaments, which then includes the men's sectionals.
Mm-hmm.
At summer games, I oversee 4 of the 8 sports. So I oversee bocce, powerlifting, swimming, and volleyball. And then once we get into EKS games, at Brebeuf, I oversee corn toss. Volleyball now got moved away from Brebeuf. So if you haven't seen those new calendar changes for EKS games this fall, be sure to check those out. But I oversee corn toss and the individual skills competition. I also oversee all of our golf competition, unified volleyball, and I think that's everything that I oversee for EKS games. There's a lot of stuff. And then I don't oversee bowling necessarily, but normally I'm at one of the venues for state bowling in December, helping out. So those are kind of the sports I oversee. If you want me to go into more detail, I could tell you a little bit more about what goes into planning an event, but that's kind of just a brief overview of what I do.
Yeah, we will definitely get into that
Sure.
here in just a minute. For those listeners, you probably have seen Patrick at a lot of these events. His face is probably very recognizable as like one of those people wearing the official state office polos, running around with like a crazy person trying to deal with everything. Now you can actually learn a little bit about him. So I think that's part of like what I want to do with this whole platform, is so you can like get to know some of the people that you see all the time at these venues. You're like, oh, he looks like he's one of those state office people, but I don't really know anything about him. Well, now you can learn a little bit about him. Also, I am a fellow Chelsea fan, so the flag in the background makes me a very, very happy person.
You're a good man.
So tell us a little bit about like, a little bit of details on like what your role is like, because you are like in charge of all like sports management.
Yeah. So like I said, my title is manager of sports programs. Outside of overseeing the events, some of the other things I do, I work with our area teams. So, spring games that happen in the spring and fall. Some of the areas host our sectional competitions. So if it's my sport, I work with our area teams. And then I'm also the one then that I deal with rule changes. So, all the rule changes that happen in the program information guide year to year. Again, if it's my sport, I deal with those. I trying to think of what other kind of non-sport things I deal with in the office on a daily basis. I oversee the coaches education program. So I know, especially right now for Alps, a lot of the athletes who are doing the sports track need to do some of the courses to get, various levels in our coaches education program. So I'm the one who kind of helps decide what those courses are, what each level entails. And then when athletes or coaches finish those courses, they send me the certificates. And I keep track of all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, primarily it's, I would say, well over 50% of my time is spent on the events themselves. I think a lot of folks would probably be surprised to find out how long it takes us to plan, for some of the events. There's obviously a lot that goes into it, in the immediate days and weeks leading up to it, but some of our planning takes place a year in advance in some cases.
I know have been a few times where I have been at the state office, specifically for something that we're going to talk about a little later, which is that lovely divisioning thing. But I've seen last time I was at the office, you guys were planning for one of the polar plunges.
Mm-hmm.
And that little meeting that you guys had was just like, I just was kind of listening into it, and I was like, there's so much stuff. How do you guys remember it all?
I think each of us probably has our own way of, how we keep our thoughts organized. For me, I tend to keep a lot of lists over the last couple of years. Like, as I'm going through an event, I'll try and keep track of all the different tasks and things that I've had to do for that event. And I'll try and make little notes on, like if it's summer games, for instance, I'll try and keep track of, did I do that task 2 weeks out, 4 weeks out, 2 months out, just so then next year I kind of have a running list in order of, here's all the different things I need to have on my radar. Obviously, certain times are more busier than others. And a lot of it is helping each other. There are things like Scott Mingle and I work really closely together, since we oversee the bulk of the sports that we offer. So we're constantly talking and asking each other, hey, did you think about this? Did you remember to contact, this person? So, I kind of have, like I said, I have my way of staying organized, but ultimately it's a team effort, and everyone helps each other out and making sure that we're not letting things fall through the cracks.
Right. Okay. That's always good to have a little bit of extra help with that kind of stuff, because you guys have a lot of stuff you guys go through when setting up for any of these events. So overall, I mean, obviously soccer is very near and dear to you because of your flag behind you. What other sports do you actually enjoy?
So soccer is like really the big one. I grew up playing soccer. I played that all through high school, and that was the one sport that I played consistently from youth age through high school. When I was younger, I was into basketball and football, and like many young boys, or not even boys, but many young kids, into almost every sport that there was, or you watch what your dad watches. And as I grew up, I kind of grew out of basketball. I was blessed that I grew up watching the Jordan era in the 90s, watching the Chicago Bulls. And to me, it's just, especially pro basketball, just isn't quite the same. I never really had a collegiate allegiance, so I don't get into the whole IU-Purdue rivalry when it comes to basketball, things like that. So college basketball wasn't really my thing. The other sport that I really tend to watch a lot of, or that I enjoy a lot of, is hockey. If you're not familiar with it, in some ways it's a smaller-sided version of soccer, but on ice. A lot of the strategy is the same. A lot of the movement of the players and the puck is the same as what you would see on a soccer field. It's just condensed into a smaller area with less players. But now hockey, it's much more prevalent on TV. Growing up, it wasn't on TV quite as much as what it is now. But it's become just more fun to watch. They're very fast-paced games. It's amazing how quickly those guys can move up and down the ice. And it's one of the few sports where they allow a little bit of fighting to an extent. They not as much as what they used to, but there are still some fights, and you don't get to see that necessarily as much in traditional sports anymore.
We went to the Special Olympics night that the Indy Fuel had on.
That was I was there that night. That was a good night.
My mom has fallen in love with hockey after that. She thinks it's the greatest thing in the world now. So
if I'm not mistaken, was that Blackhawks night?
I think so. I'm not sure.
I think it was too, because if I'm not mistaken, so the Fuel are an affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. So it's similar to like a AAA baseball team. That's like what the Fuel are to.
They're a developmental team.
So they had their stadium singer come down and do the national anthem. And then they always wear like Blackhawk themed jerseys. And that's one of the best nights to go to a Fuel game. Because it's the crowd is packed, and it's fun. Hockey's a fun sport to watch. It really is.
I had a blast. I think that was the second hockey game I'd ever been to. The first one was in Indiana Ice, so you can tell that was a long time ago.
Wow, yeah.
But it was a lot of fun, and we were planning on going to another one for her birthday, but of course, everything happened, and now we didn't get to go to that one. So
yeah, that's a bummer. I'm missing sports right now. I'll be really excited when live games are back on TV and it's not just replays.
I was talking with another athlete, and we were discussing that we're lucky that we're wrestling fans because they're still doing stuff. So
I was going to say, you guys, I'm not a big wrestling fan, but I know that WrestleMania was this past weekend, and so I'm assuming you guys had a pretty enjoyable time watching that then.
It was weird. Like, I've watched wrestling, and I've actually done some wrestling for many, many years, and an empty arena show, like, with no fans, it was just surreal because you weren't. It's a little strange. Like, you're expecting to hear all the fans cheering when certain things happen, but it was just quiet. It was still a good show overall, but it was just a little strange.
Sure. Yeah, I could imagine. It's even right before a lot of people went into quarantine and lockdowns. There were a couple like major sporting events that were played, or not events, but games that were played without fans. And it is a lot different watching a game when, like, I'm a soccer guy, so there were a couple soccer matches that were played, and when you don't have the fans, singing and chanting, even just the ambient noise of people cheering as people are playing, it just totally different environment. As an athlete, I feel like that would be kind of hard to compete in and really bring your.
The fact that they were able to do it, though, this shows how professional these guys are.
It's true. That's a good point.
I mean, I've been to a few Indy 11 games, which those are entertaining.
They are, yeah. I haven't been to one in, admittedly, a couple of years. I think really since they moved into Lucas Oil, it's just been a little bit harder for me to get down there. But I do. I love the Indy 11 games. It's a fun atmosphere, especially if you go sit in the Brickyard Battalion section. If you've never been to a soccer game before, it's not a rough and rowdy crowd like sometimes that group can be made out to be, or like like the soccer fan areas can be made out to be. It's for the most part pretty family friendly, and it's a really good time. It's the best spot in the stadium to watch the game if you want like the real experience.
Yeah, so if you've never been to an Indy 11 game, the Brickyard Battalion is positioned behind one of the goals. So if they happen to be on that side and they score a goal right in front of the battalion, that is the greatest moment of being at one of those games. It's so cool.
It is. It's fun, and that's so that's where all the Indy 11 supporters sit. It's standing room only, so it's a general admission ticket where whatever seat you get is where you sit. But that's where you're allowed to bring flags and banners, and those are the folks who are upstanding and chanting and singing the whole game. So yeah, it's a really, really fun time.
That is every game I've been to. I've been to like 6 or 7 games, and I've always been at the Battalion. I've never been anywhere else.
Yeah, can't go wrong.
So outside of Special Olympics, what other kind of things are you into? Obviously sports, but
yeah, I mean, obviously I like watching a lot of sports from about 7:30 a.m. to about 2 p.m. every Saturday. I've got soccer on TV. There's about 3 matches that you can get in there. But then recently, my wife and we go hiking quite often. I would say almost every weekend, or at least every other weekend. We go out and hit a trail. We like doing really rugged hiking. So those are trails where the trail itself isn't necessarily defined. It's not like you're walking through the woods and there's a nice dirt trail that is kind of laid out for you. You're walking through creek beds and over down trees and over smaller streams, things like that. So we find that really enjoyable. Enjoy getting outside as much as I can. I think there's a nice calming element to being out in nature and just kind of walking around. Especially the first few weeks of quarantine, we still were going to state parks because that's one of the few things that's still open right now. And we'd get out there and we'd be the only car in the entire park. And so it's nice to, be able to walk, 8 miles over the course of 4 or 5 hours, stopping every once in a while and never see anyone else when you're out there. So that's been, especially right now, like getting through quarantine and being stuck inside a lot. We've been trying to get out as much as we can when we can, just so that, we're not getting too stir crazy.
Right.
That's one thing. And we have a dog. So we take him with every time we go, and he loves that. He loves getting out and exploring. Other than that, we just bought a house. So I closed on the house last week. So like right now, a lot of it is trying to get our house ready to move in. We got to do some painting. We got to put up a fence for our dog. So that's really what most of my time has been consumed with over the last week, is just getting ready to do all that stuff. There's a lot more that goes into home ownership than sometimes what you think.
Yeah.
Going into it, but it's been a really fun experience. We're excited. It's our first house, so we're pumped for that.
Helping Tori move in with her house, my sister, and she was pretty much like expecting like all the things that happened. There were just a few things that were a little off, but
yeah, there's certainly more. I'm in an apartment now, and so there's certainly more stuff to do. Than when you're in an apartment, because you're responsible for all of those maintenance things that come up, once you're in a house. So
yeah, you can't call a maintenance guy.
No, I am the maintenance guy now. So
so I hinted on it a little bit earlier, getting back with some of the Special Olympics stuff. I think that you have probably one of the most fun, but also least fun jobs that you could have possibly, and that is divisioning, because that makes a lot of people not the happiest about certain things.
Sure.
Can you explain a little bit about what you do for divisioning?
Yeah, so I think it's important to remember that there's kind of a different process of divisioning when it comes to team sports versus individual sports. And the reason being is, with individual sports, generally those are timed. So with, track and field, swimming, those are sports where we have qualifying times. So we're easily able to, if there's 100 athletes in a particular event, we can order those athletes from the slowest time to the quickest time. And it makes it a lot easier to then say, well, this group of athletes goes together and these do and these do, because you've already got them in order with the time that they've already run the event. So I don't want to spend maybe necessarily too much time talking about the individual aspect, because I think that's probably one that most folks understand a little bit better. And candidly, there's not as maybe many protests or arguments as to the divisioning with individual sports because you're dealing with a timed event. A lot of the comments, concerns, complaints that we tend to get when it comes to divisioning are with team sports. So I'll use basketball in my examples just because that's probably it's one of our largest team sports by far. We have about 275 total teams in Indiana. That includes 3-on-3, 5-on-5, men's, women, and youth teams. And so there's a lot of them. The reason that team sports are a little bit harder is you don't have that time to compare to another athlete. So, you know, the question is then, well, what do you use to division? And so that's what makes it hard. So I don't know how familiar the athletes will necessarily be with these, but all of our basketball coaches have game records that they fill out. So basically, as you guys are playing basketball games throughout the regular season before we get to sectionals, a lot of teams go to those invitational basketball tournaments to get their games in. And the coaches are bringing their game records for them, and they're saying, you know, we played this team. Here was the score. You know, we thought our team was a lot better than the other team, or we weren't as good as the other team. And then I have a notes section, and, you know, we have some really, really good coaches who give me a lot of good notes, such as, you know, we were missing our best player, or, you know, we were down 20 points at halftime and the other team sat their starters. So we came back, and so the score looks closer than what the game actually was. That's the kind of stuff that helps me out with divisioning. And then on the other hand, we have some coaches that maybe just give me the scores of the game, and if they thought their team was better or worse, and that's all I have to look at. So when we're divisioning for basketball, you kind of have to look at, well, really the main thing you're looking for are common opponents. So let's say that I was coaching a basketball team, or better yet, Ben, because I know you coach a basketball team. So let's say, you know, if I'm looking at your game records form, I'm basically looking at who your opponents were, and then I'm trying to find another team that played the same opponents that you did.
Okay.
So let's say you're coaching a team and I'm coaching a team. And let's say that my colleague Scott Mingle is also coaching a team. And so your team plays Scott's team and you beat Scott's team. And let's say my team plays Scott's team and my team loses to Scott's team. Through basic logic, we can infer that my team would probably lose to your team because we both played the same opponent and you won and I lost. So with divisioning, that's what we're doing, but you're doing it, again, when I have – let's take just men's teams, for instance. There's 210 of them spread across 7 sectional sites. So there's about 30 teams within each sectional site. So we're doing those little comparisons, you know, hundreds of times throughout that process of divisioning and trying to figure out, you know, which teams fit together, which teams maybe don't. So, you know, you kind of start with a whole pool of teams and you slowly start sorting out, you know, here are who I think are maybe the better teams. Here are maybe the teams that, you know, still need to work and develop some skills. And you just kind of keep getting more and more detailed until you come out with, you know, groups of 3 or 4 for the sectional brackets. So that was, for those of you watching who may not be familiar with the divisioning process, even after that broad overview, it still may sound a little confusing. And that's because to some degree it is. We joke in the office that it's kind of part art, part science. There's a little bit of science to it, but some of it is just going on our gut feeling in terms of saying, well, I think this team fits better here. And, you know, I like to think that overall we do a pretty good job. I know we're not perfect. We certainly make some mistakes, which are definitely easier to see after the fact, after games are played, as opposed to when I'm, trying to create brackets for sectionals or state competition. But that's a kind of broad overview of what we do in the divisioning process and kind of how we get to where we get to.
Okay. So, and I've sat in on the last divisioning process, so getting to learn all about all of that was eye-opening.
I was gonna say it's, it can seem easy, and if you're just comparing a small number of teams, it probably would be a little bit easy. But like I said, over the amount of teams that we have, it can really make it difficult. The other thing I think it's important to point out is that, everyone wants to win. That's why we're entering a basketball tournament. Everyone wants to win sectionals and wants to win the state tournament. And unfortunately, like I said, sometimes I don't get the divisions wrong, but at the same time, this is sports. And so not everyone can always win. In a division of 4 people, there's always going to be 3 who don't unfortunately win the gold medal and who don't necessarily get to go to state. So I always like stressing to coaches, who maybe reach out to me with concerns that, first, I'm doing my best, and I apologize if you think I messed up, but I also think it's just as important that, are we in this to win? Yeah, of course, but there are also important lessons to be learned in losing. So while you may not always feel like you got, the better end of a bargain in terms of divisioning, I think it's always important to point out that, there are a lot of lessons to be learned, from losing, sometimes in a blowout, sometimes in a really close game. But, learning how to pick ourselves up and bounce back from that, I think are really important lessons to learn. And that's one of the reasons that we use sports to teach those lessons, because it's a great avenue for that.
All right. So that actually kind of hopefully will explain a lot for some of the people that have questions and wonder how divisioning works. I know it's when sitting down in the conference room, seeing the stacks of papers and everything, it was a bit intimidating, but we ended up getting through it pretty well, and unfortunately it didn't end up going anywhere because of everything that happened. So say, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about yourself? Like any other interesting facts about Patrick?
Oh man. So probably maybe one interesting thing that, especially a lot of probably athletes and coaches and anyone in the county programs watching, who they may not know this about me, but for about 2 or 3 years before I started with Special Olympics, so in between when I graduated college and when I took a job here, I worked event security. So I was the venue security manager for, it's now Ruoff Home Mortgage Music Center, which, just a side note, I think is one of the worst names for a music venue. It has no flow to it whatsoever. When I was there, it was called Klipsch Music Center. Some folks might know it as Verizon, and if you go back even further, most folks still call it Deer Creek. But I was the venue security manager there for about 1.5 years, 2 years. Prior to that, I was just a part-time hourly security guard. My company actually got the first contract for venue security when Indy 11 had their inaugural season. So I was the one who, the very first season, set up their security plan at IUPUI for that venue for our part-time guards. And then I also did the lawn at White River State Park, as well as the Murat, which is an indoor theater in downtown Indianapolis. So I had 4 venues that I oversaw at any given time. And so it was a lot of fun. I got to see a lot of cool concerts. Got to see a lot of interesting things, as you can imagine, doing event security. You're primarily dealing with intoxicated folks who've maybe had a little too many beverages when they were tailgating. So Yeah, I got to see a lot of interesting things doing that. I got to meet a lot of cool people. Got to meet a lot of, famous musicians that have come through those venues. And yeah, it was a really good time. I enjoyed doing it. Um, Especially as a younger guy, I worked a lot of hours, but it was a fun time. I didn't really have much else to do with my time. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it was fun. But yeah, so a lot of people probably don't know that about me, that I have that background as well.
Any special or fond memories of any hanging out with any band members or anything like that?
Um, I'm trying to think. Some of the stories I have might not necessarily be appropriate. Um, I want to make sure I'm keeping it family friendly, but God, I mean, I think the most interesting thing was just no one act or anything necessarily stands out. I think it's interesting that just the range of people that you meet
Right.
doing concerts everywhere from, like, I met the Jonas Brothers one time at a concert, who are, some of the nicest guys you could ever meet. They were very grateful, and at the time, it was when they were younger, when they were maybe more considered like a boy band, I guess
Mhm.
you'd say. And so, maybe public perception might, say that they were going to be a little bit snooty or something like that, but no, they were like really nice guys, really humble and down to earth and appreciative of everything we were doing for them. And then I won't necessarily name names, but there are other musical acts that really don't respect venue security, and in some ways can do some things that can almost put our safety in jeopardy
Mhm.
just by the things that they're saying or actions that they're taking. So, it was just interesting. Each show was a different experience, just based on kind of who was coming in. So, I'm trying to think of if there's any, like, really crazy stories or anything that I could tell. So the one story that I can tell, it was this was one of my very first events ever that I was the venue manager for. And it was May Day Music Festival, which
Oh
was at
boy.
it was Klipsch Music Center, Deer Creek, Ruoff, whatever you want to call it
Mhm.
now. For those of you who aren't familiar with what May Day Music Festival is, it's a music festival. So rather than there being kind of one headliner and where the concert starts, at 6, 7 o'clock at night and runs for 3, 4 hours, this starts at 10 in the morning. There's a couple different stages in the venue, and there's music all throughout the day. And then there's like 4 or 5 headliners on one main stage as it gets later in the evening. So generally for a show, you have a security meeting with, tour security to go over anything that's going to happen throughout the show. Is the artist going to leave the stage? Are you doing any meet and greets? Where do you want specific coverage at in the venue? Anything out of the ordinary, things like that. For a music festival, because there's, 20 to 30 acts coming in throughout the day, you can't meet with everyone individually. So the headliner this year was Bush and Soundgarden.
Okay.
So if you're not familiar with those bands, they're kind of like from the 90s grunge scene, kind of similar music style to like Nirvana a little bit. If you've never heard of them, check them out. It's good music. So this happened during Bush's set. Meet with their security guy. Hey, anything going to happen? He says, yes, the lead singer is going to, in the middle of a cover of the song Come Together, which is originally by the Beatles. They're going to cover the song, and the lead singer is going to jump off stage and run through the crowd. And I said, okay, hey, no problem. You want me to give you any security guards to go with him? He says, no, like, it'll just be me and you, and we'll go run with him. And so again, I'm naive. This is my first, or one of my first shows really being in charge.
Mhm.
And I'm just like, yeah, okay, cool, no problem. Like, we got this, which didn't turn out to necessarily be the case. But so the song Come Together comes on, and I'm waiting in the barricade, kind of shadowing this artist. He's going back and forth, and he jumps off stage. I go to follow him. And if you're not familiar with the music venue that we're talking about, it's a 25,000 person outdoor amphitheater. There's a lower section called the pavilion, and that's where all the reserved seats are. Then there's a crosswalk that goes between the pavilion and what's called the lawn, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a giant grassy area. And so the lead singer gets to the top of the pavilion, is looking around, singing, looking at the crowd, getting them all hyped up. And he kind of looks back at me and gives me the look like, hey, I'm about to go run up the lawn. And I gave him my look that said, please don't. He disregarded that and just like kind of ran straight up the lawn. And so I have my hand on his belt so that I don't lose him going through the crowd of people that are now trying to swarm us. And we go up, and going up was fine because we were moving. Well, when we stopped to turn around, the crowd just like enveloped us. And it's one of the scariest moments of my life. If you've never had a crowd like sweep you off your feet where you're standing chest to chest with someone because it's so tight, my heart was racing. It was because you're just kind of swaying back and forth at the mercy of the people moving around you. And my feet weren't really touching the ground. So I'm chest to chest with the lead singer of the band while he's still singing, and both of us are kind of giving each other the look of like, what the heck is going on? This is kind of crazy. And so we're getting pushed around a little bit. We work our way back down to the crosswalk, at which point there's some steps, and it's hard to describe, but about 50 to 75 people just kind of fell all at once. And it became a situation where like now we were starting to worry about people's safety and people getting trampled, something like that. So, I'm screaming, he's telling people to calm down. Eventually he cut the music, told his band to stop playing to kind of get everyone to calm down and, give us some room. We didn't want anyone to get hurt at that point, which is what our biggest concern was.
Right.
So once everyone calmed down, we get him back up onto the stage. The show goes on. Everything's cool. Well, I come around the corner and one of my colleagues asked me like, asked if it was me that was screaming into the microphone. And I was like, well, I don't know. I might have been. I was certainly yelling for people to back up. I don't know if I was screaming into the microphone or not. And it turns out I was. The microphone that the artist had was close enough to me that it was picking up everything that I said. And I might not have been very nice, or we'll say there might have been some inappropriate language that was used in the venue that came out all the speakers for everyone to hear. So that was a little bit embarrassing. But after the show, that particular artist kind of came up and, thanked me for kind of riding that situation out with him, and asked me if I was all right. We kind of chatted for a couple minutes, and that was that. But that was just one of the many stories of my days of event security.
So it sounds like you've had some pretty cool things happen with that. So what was that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. A lot of fun stuff. I was very fortunate to get to see some of the things that I was able to.
And you said you also did like event security at the Murad, or what was that?
Yeah, so I think it's now there's multiple theaters within it's Murad or Murad might be another way you hear it, or if you're looking on like the Live Nation website, it's known as the Old National Center.
So the Egyptian Room.
Yes. Old National Center is the building. The Egyptian Room is the venue upstairs. There is a full theater downstairs, and then in the basement there's an even smaller venue where they have like up and coming artists. So in their theater they can do concerts. They can also do like theatrical productions. Upstairs in the Egyptian Room is about 2,000 people, standing room only, and that's primarily concerts.
I went to a Skillet concert there once.
It's a great venue. That's one of my favorite venues to see a show, because 2,000 people is a pretty small and intimate venue. You can, most of the time, the Egyptian Room is general admission. So you just, wherever you want to stand, you stand, and there's really not a bad view in that.
No, there isn't,
because it's so small. So I've done, like I said, so I've done everything from like country concerts to music festivals to theatrical productions like plays and like Wicked, Sesame Street.
Oh wow!
Well, I mean a whole bunch of different things there at the Marat.
So like I was saying, sounds like you've had a lot of fun memories from your time as a security
Yep.
person. What are some of your fondest memories of being involved with Special Olympics?
Man, that's a tough one. That's a
Asking you to pick children, basically.
yeah, a little bit. Oh man, I'm trying to think. I think probably one of the things that sticks out to me, just because it was a little bit more recent, was going to Seattle in 2018 for USA Games. Partially because that was a little bit of a different. It was almost a role reversal for me as a staff person, because I'm used to being the one planning and organizing an event, where when I go to Seattle for USA Games, I more take the role of a coach or
Right.
like the delegation. So I was in the shoes of, a lot of our coaches and HODs and kind of having to go through a lot of the same challenges that they go through, and getting a delegation ready for like summer games, especially, is probably the closest thing that it relates to. So I think that was really fun. That was one of the times where I've actually gotten to maybe interact on a more personal level with our athletes. When I'm at an event, I tend to be moving around. I'll stop and say hi and chat, but I normally don't have time to talk, for more than a minute or two before I have to go do something. Where in Seattle, I'm not responsible for an event. I just have to help, make sure athletes are getting to their events, make sure our coaches have what they need. But, I had more time to sit down and like eat dinner with, some athletes and learn more personal things about them get to know me. And like I said, as staff people, we don't get those opportunities as much as like our coaches do. And so for me, that's the best thing about Special Olympics, is the athletes are what makes Special Olympics so great. Like, yeah, we have great coaches, we have great volunteers and staff, but we wouldn't be able to do this without our athletes. So that was a really rewarding experience. I was out there for about 10 days. We took about 50 athletes out with us, and it was just a really fun time. Seattle in general was a cool city to have it in. The weather was great, and yeah, that was probably the most recent thing that sticks out to me.
Oh, Seattle. I was so jealous of Tori when she got to go.
Yeah.
I was so proud of her, though. Like, I was more excited that I think for her than I think she was in general, which I doubt. She was very, very excited about getting to go. But I just remember how excited we were, because we watched the ESPN footage of opening ceremonies. And when they called out Indiana, we scoured the screen to try to get a glimpse of Tori. And we happened to, her long blonde hair stuck out like a sore thumb at one point. We were just like, oh, hey, there she is.
That was walking into, it was Husky Stadium, which is where University of Washington plays their football games, is where the opening ceremonies were held. And that was a really cool experience. Walking in with all of our athletes as a delegation and seeing, I was really surprised at how many family members traveled out there, not just from Indiana, but I mean, like from a bunch of other states, and even Indiana to Seattle is a long trip. So to see all the families out there, and there were just people there from the general public, who came to see what was going on. And so it was really cool. Yeah, it was a fun experience. Opening ceremonies was fun. Speaking of ESPN, so ESPN was there all week covering different sports. And so Kevin Nagandi, who is one of their anchors for Sports Center, and he's the one who did a lot of their coverage out there. He's one of the when ESPN covers a lot of Special Olympics stuff, he tends to be one of the anchors that they send out there.
Okay.
But he was set up at flag football one day, and so I was just kind of standing behind his camera guys, watching him, do his thing and talk and record and whatever. And, they had like no security with them. So I literally was standing like right behind his camera guy. I could see everything, hear everything. It was pretty cool. And he kind of noticed that we were standing there watching and just like called us out and, hey, how's it going, guys? And like brought us out on the set to take photos and stuff. And
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, he was a really cool guy. You could tell that he like enjoyed being there and covering the games. Like it wasn't, you could tell it wasn't just like an assignment. Like he actually enjoyed, being there and spreading the word, which was cool.
I know we stayed up super late to watch the swimming because, of course, that's what Tori was doing, and
right.
Of course, Indiana kicked a lot of butt in the swimming.
They could. I will say the swimmers did, but I mean all the other sports did too. We came back with a lot of hardware.
I did, yeah. I saw. We went back and watched like the basketball stuff too when we could. So, like that had to have been a crazy experience just getting to go. And so, what else? Like getting to interact with all the different athletes. Did you do a lot? I know they were doing a lot of pin trading. Did you get into any of that kind of stuff while you were out there?
A little bit. I'm not a very outwardly social person in general, so which is weird because people who know me will look at that statement and be like, Patrick, come on, like it's hard to get me to stop talking sometimes. But especially around people I don't know in an environment that I'm not familiar with. I'm not going to walk up to people that I don't know necessarily. So it was hard. Candidly, we had a couple of athletes on our team who were like the go-getters when it came to getting pins. So luckily, like when they were going out and getting pins, I'd just give them one of mine as an extra, and they would come back with another state for me.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a couple athletes out there that probably responsible for about 50% of the pins that I collected.
Okay.
I do have at the desk at my office is my credential hanging, and so I've got all the different pins on that lanyard. I think I collected probably close to about 25.
Oh wow!
So, but there was one athlete on Team Indiana who I believe got all 50 states, which is really hard to do because at USA games, like Alaska and Hawaii only bring 4 to 6 athletes, and like all of Hawaii's athletes were at track and field. So unless you have athletes at track and field, you're not going to see them. It's hard to find a lot of the small states to like find them to trade pins.
Right.
So yeah, for him to be able to get all 50 was like, that was pretty cool. I was no one else was able to do it on our delegation, I don't think.
Yeah, that's a cool little map to make out of all that.
Yeah, but yeah, there's a lot of pin trading that goes down. That's one where it's similar to what I would imagine the experience is like for athletes at summer games, but instead of interacting with a lot of athletes from different county programs, you're getting to meet people from across the country, and develop friendships. So, yeah, it's a really great time. I know, we're getting ready. I think 2022 is the next USA games in Disney. It's at the Wide World of Sports in Disney. So, yeah, watching. If you haven't been to a USA games, it's a fun time.
I've said I will find a way to get there, be it with Tori as like her helper or as an athlete or going down with something for the state office. I will find a way to be there.
I don't blame you. Florida is going to be I think we're going to get a lot of applications for Team Indiana for Florida for a lot of different reasons. It's Disney World, it's Florida, the weather's going to be great. Who wouldn't want to go?
Right. So I know that the pin trading is a fun thing, but back here for our 50th, we had those collectible cards. Do you know who came up with the idea for those? By chance?
I don't. So that probably there's probably two, if I had to guess, two different groups or areas where it would have come from. One would be someone on our development team. So our development team those are the folks who oversee like Olympic Town and souvenirs. They oversee all of our fundraising events. So the polar plunges, the plane pole, like that. So I think that came out of, kind of one of their brainstorming sessions. But I also know that we had a lot of folks, especially for the 50th anniversary, whether it was other coaches, athletes, volunteers. We had a lot of, outside input for the 50th. So I'm not positive of whether that kind of came internally or if someone suggested that to us. It's also possible that, another state was thinking about doing that and we maybe took that idea. That's not uncommon. It's especially those states who talk to one another. We steal ideas from each other all the time because why reinvent the wheel if they've found something that works and like ends up being a great idea? We'll steal it. And yeah, we might tweak it and build on it, but
I can't remember. Did you have a card?
Probably not. I don't think so.
I didn't know if it went that far.
No, most so I don't think probably the only staff members that would have been on the cards were maybe Mike Furnish or Jeff Mueller. The whole idea behind the cards, I know, was to really highlight people who have gotten us from 1969 to 2019. So we really wanted to focus on folks who helped us build this from a grassroots. Well, we still are a grassroots organization, but who really helped lay the foundation to like build the organization of where we're at now. So I know there were probably some folks on there that unfortunately have passed away and are no longer with us. There were some folks on there that probably are still involved in Special Olympics Indiana and have been involved for a really long time. And I know they were highlighting probably former staff members, key volunteers. I think there were some athletes who had cards.
Some athletes of the years and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was like I said, it was one of our many small ways of being able to say thank you, to those who support us.
Okay. Well, unless you've got anything else you'd like to add, I think we could probably go ahead and wrap this up.
Yeah, no, I don't think I have anything else. I just want to say thanks again for having me on here. This was really, really enjoyable. I had a good time. So
I appreciate this. I'm hoping these show up every once in a while on the because I don't know how often the state office is actually meeting or how often you talk to anybody with everything.
So make sure too, like, are you spreading this out on social media?
I'm doing I've got a Facebook page that you just look up So What, a Special Olympics Indiana podcast. You can find that on Facebook, where these go up on YouTube on Wednesdays. So I'm doing it that way. I've been told by a few people I need to make like an Instagram for it and a couple other things, which I've been considering because I've never really dabbled too much into Instagram. But I'm trying to get it out there as much as I can, and the right people see it and they share it along, and it's done very well so far. I just had a call from give me just a second. Danielle Smith, she called it like in between or a little bit earlier, and she had said, "Oh yeah, we've seen a lot of your podcasts," and I was like, "Oh cool, that makes me feel good." So.
Yeah, I know. There's been some folks who I'm like friends with on Facebook who've shared them. And when you post them on Facebook, if you can, I would just make sure you tag, Special Olympics Indiana, so that hopefully Nate sees it and he can also then share the post if you make it shareable.
I've seen it a couple times on there, like the ones with Jeff have popped up on the actual Special Olympics Indiana page.
Yeah. Do you have Nate's email?
I do, actually, from stuff with
what you can do too is I would recommend just send him an email and say, hey, these are coming out every Wednesday. If you want to follow it on the Special Olympics one and share the ones that you think are important, he'd be the guy to really amplify it on social media for you. He takes care of all of our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, kind of all those outlets.
Okay.
So yeah, but yeah, other than that, I just want to say thanks. You can invite me back anytime.
Absolutely.
And then, for all the athletes or anyone else who's watching out there, I know it's been rough the last few weeks. I'm in the middle of now week 3 working from home, and I've got about 3 more weeks of doing this. So I know it's not fun. I know it can get boring, but we're going to get through this. We'll be back, competing before we know it. And in the meantime, do what you can to stay safe and stay healthy. And, the more that, we deal with this and stay inside, the sooner we'll be able to get back out and get back to competition. So.
Very, very well said. Well, for all of you listening, please definitely like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel. Like I mentioned, we upload every Wednesday. Thank you all again for listening, and thank you, Patrick, for joining me for this episode. I hope everybody listening has a great rest of their day, and we will see you next week.